All right, so we are live, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And of course, there are no classrooms right now. All of you are joining us today live at home on YouTube, and we really appreciate you tuning in. Today, we continue a series with the beautiful Vancouver Aquarium in the heart of Stanley Park in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And so today we are joined by an educator there named Nicole. She has been doing all our sessions with us over the last couple of weeks. And today we are going to dive in on coral reefs, the most biodiverse regions of the ocean, making up, I think, less than 2% of all the oceans of the world, but with a huge proportion of all the species in the seas. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us. And let's hear a little bit about why coral reefs are so exciting.
Thank you very much, Jesse. For me, I'm Nicole, everyone, and welcome to the Vancouver Aquarium in Canada. We're here in Vancouver, and we're at the traditional land of the Coast Salish people, including Squamish and Squamish, as well as Tsleil-Waututh nations. I'm really happy to share my experience and also knowledge here from Vancouver. So right now, I'm actually in the shark habitats that we have in the Vancouver Aquarium. Joining us, not only me, but also from the reef sharks that we have, as well as a superstar called Skuna. It's a sea turtle that is rescued along the coastal area of British Columbia. She doesn't belong to that very cold environment, but is that she actually belongs to a very unique habitat called coral reefs that we're going to talk about today. And we're going to look at different pictures as well as specimens. So if you have any question in mind, just keep it in just hold it for a second, and then we will have a Q&A section for you guys, and then try to ask more questions. Okay. So for the coral reefs, is actually near the shallow water of tropical and subtropical area. They have different kind of colors and different kind of shapes. That I want you to show you a video first in order to get ourselves familiarized with. So we have a picture here with different kind of corals. You can see different colors, and you can see the water surface as well. So it indicates that for coral reefs, they're actually from a shallow water. And I'm going to show you a video that is from our aquarium. So besides from those corals, we have fish and different kind of animals as well. So for corals, they grow together, and you can see there's a lot of holes and cracks, as well as caves, so that a lot of animals can find themselves here as home and to find their food as well. So for corals, I would like to ask you a question. So they're actually tiny, they start from tiny organisms. So I would like you to think about it. So they are actually called polyps. So are those polyps animals, or are those polyps plants from your point of view? So try to think about that in 5 seconds, and I will try to tell you the answer. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So for those corals polyps, they are actually animals. So they are actually moving around, and they try to use their body in order to get a lot of energy and protect themselves. So right now, I'm not going to talk for a long time. I want us to do some exercise together. So I want everybody to stand up for a while. And then I will try to tell you actually how those coral polyps find their food and also try to get their energy. So imagine you are actually a little polyps in the ocean, and you're actually standing on the ground like a rock. And what you do is you try to stick out all your finger-like tentacles up to the ocean, and then try to move side by side with your finger moving. And what you do is actually you use your finger-like structure called the tentacles in order to grab a lot of animals like planktons in order to get your food. So planktons are tiny invisible organisms that you can find in the ocean. And what the coral polyps do is they try to grab those planktons and try to put it into their mouth like this. So you every day at nighttime for the coral polyps, they do exactly the same. They try to get nutrients around, following the water current, and they try to eat them as many as they can in order to get energy. But it usually happens at nighttime. So what about in daytime? How can they actually get energy? So for those corals, they are very smart. They try to build their little house using the resources around them as well. So in the ocean, we have calcium inside the water too. So what the polyps do is they actually extract those calcium and try to build a house for themselves to hide and try to protect themselves. So by that time, they secrete a kind of substance called the calcium carbonate, which they are very hard, and they provide a shelter for a little polyps. And as I mentioned before, the corals are very smart. They try to find friends to live with them as well. So their friends are called algae. Is green or sometimes yellow or even brown or even different colors in general, and they will live in the calcium skeleton with the coral polyps. So what those algae do is that they try to stay on the skeleton of the corals, and they try to carry out a chain of reaction at this called photosynthesis. So what they do is they try to absorb a lot of sunlight, and then they try to convert sunlight and also carbon dioxide into oxygen as well as nutrients. So that's why, apart from grabbing plants, actually for those polyps, they can actually acquire energy from those algae as well. And those algae can live near the calcium skeleton of the corals, and that's why they can protect themselves as well. So we call it a symbiotic relationship, so that they can protect the algae, protect the coral, as at the same time the coral can actually get energy for building or growing themselves as well. So when you take a look at the video that I have shown you just now, you can see there's a lot of corals, and those corals are living in those tiny pores that I'm going to show you with a specimen on my hand. So this is a coral skeleton, and those polyps are actually living on those holes. And imagine there will be one little polyp living in one hole every time. And this is something that all the corals living together build. And what they do is they try to extend their house, try to build bigger house for all the polyps, and they build bigger and bigger and bigger. So imagine you're a little polyp, you're living in a small house. You want more and extra protection, and what you do is try to build a bigger and bigger house together with the polyps around you. So for that part, if you're a little polyp, you grow together with another friend to build a much more bigger house. We call it a coral community. So imagine you're a little house and you have a little house beside you, and there's more house living nearby, and it forms a community. And so as for the corals, polyps as well, they grow together and they build extensive coral skeleton, and so they will become stronger and there will be more protection for them. So they will have a coral community. And as there's more communities living nearby, we call that the coral reef. And there are a lot of coral reefs in the world. So I want to challenge you. So do you know where is the largest coral reef in the world? So this is my question for you. You can think about it for 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right. So it's actually called a Great Barrier Reef. So within that particular large area of the coral reef, there are a lot of different kind of marine animals. There include sea anemones, sea cucumber, as well as the sea turtles, as well as sharks. And for scientists, they keep on finding new species of corals out of the 800 species of the corals as well. So I want to show you some of the picture and let you guess some of the name of the corals, because for scientists, they need to communicate well with public about the ocean, about the coral reefs, and so they try to make use of the structure of the corals in order to name it and try to make it easier for public to learn. So let me try to give you another picture right here. So these are the pictures that my friends and I took while we were doing snorkeling in tropical area. So on the right hand side, you will see a pale white color of a coral. And scientists actually make use of the body structure in order to name after it. So for this, it looks like a disc that you use to listen to music or even watch a video. And so for scientists to try to name this kind of corals as disc coral, so that for public, they can identify them very easily and they try to learn more about them using a very common name. So here is my challenge for you. So if you take a look at the left-hand side, you will see a yellow spherical coral, and I want you to name after it. Try to relate it to something that you know and try to guess the name of it.
So, Nicole, we've actually got really active people on YouTube that have been answering all your questions. So before they mentioned Great Barrier Reef was our biggest reef, and we've already had someone say that the one on the left is brain coral.
That's so cool. That is actually the brain coral. So I took this photo in a tropical area in the Maldives, and then it looks like just a human brain. So for scientists, they actually name it as brain corals, and there are a lot of different kind of species for this family. And you will see for scientists, they actually name those coral after something that we know. And this one is some other corals that we have in the Great Barrier Reef as well. So on the left, you will see some more colorful corals. They are actually disc coral as well. And on the right-hand side, you will see it. They are actually sticking out from everywhere. And then they just look like steak. And some of my friends actually mentioned it just they just look like the horn on the deer. So for some of the scientists, they actually named this as the staghorn corals, so that people can identify them right away by looking at the structure of it. So as you can see from that staghorn corals, there are little fish living inside. This is how the coral reefs benefits for those animals too, because for corals, they have different shapes. Some of them are spherical, some of them are like this disc-like structure, and some of them actually have cracks between the corals. So that's why it creates habitats for animals like fish or even sea turtles to stay in order to protect themselves. And corals actually can protect themselves as well. So for corals, polyps, they're actually relatives to jellyfish. So what they do is actually they have stinging cell on their body as well. So when there's fish or even sharks coming by, those tentacles will be sticking out and try to sting those animals around them in order to scare them away. But for human, those stinging effect is not that effective for us, so it's not poisonous for us. But some people may cause allergic reaction because when they touch those corals too. So it's better for us to stay at a very safe distance while we are watching corals by a naked eye. And for those corals, they're amazing because they are trying to produce oxygen with those algae that live on the skeleton. So for scientists, we have been emphasized on how to protect those coral reefs. One of the reasons is that they actually provide us with a lot of oxygen. So I want you to take a deep breath together. So some of the oxygen that you just breathe in is actually come from those corals along with the algae that live with it as well. So that's why we have to protect the coral reef in order to safeguard our resources. And some of the fishermen or the people who live near the coastal area, they actually rely on those coral as well. Just because there are a large amount of fish to harvest, a large amount of seafood such as sea urchin or sea cucumber that live inside, that is the food that the people need every day, or to sell it in order to get the money and try to live or to earn a living. And for those fishermen or the people in tropical area, they rely on those coral skeleton a lot. So what they do is actually they try to go on a beach and find skeleton like this, and they would try to pick them and try to get them back home and burn it in a furnace. And after that, the corals will be broken down back into structure substance called lime, or we call it calcium carbonate, which are actually the building materials for buildings, as well as materials for making bowls and utensils for their meals. So it's very important for us to really have those resources for human, and it's very important for the animals to live in, because there's holes and there's food for them to prey on. So nowadays we have a lot of threats that the coral reefs are actually facing that we need to focus really closely in order to help protect our resources, as well as our fish or even animals in the ecosystem. So, Jesse, do you want Q&A first, and then we jump into the conservation message?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, giving us so much info on coral reefs and how amazing they are. For our people tuning in at home, you guys have been really active on YouTube, so keep it coming. Just type in questions in the chat bar, and I'll pass along as many as I can to Nicole as we get going. So we have people, geez, from California, Massachusetts, all across Ontario and more, so we really appreciate you guys being here. Our first question from Ewan and Callum in Sudbury, Ontario, Nicole, is how many species of coral are there, and do we know?
Cool. So for corals, they have two different kind of corals. One is called the soft corals, which they do not have a lot of calcium carbonate around them. And the other one is called stony coral, or we call it the hard coral. So the specimen that I've shown you is a kind of stony coral, which they have a lot of calcium carbonate building around them. So for the hard coral, we do have 800 species of them. So for scientists, they're still finding more. And for soft coral, I do not have the number for that, but I can show you something really cool right now. And this is something that I really know recently, just because I just came to Canada a few months ago, and then a lot of people tell me, oh, you know what, Canada has a lot of creatures that all of us should know, and one of them are actually called the deep sea coral. So these are the deep sea corals that you can find 4,000 kilometers underground and under the water. And you can see the color variation is not that vibrant as the one that you can see in the shallow water. But they do rely on nutrients around them. So they usually use the tentacles to really find the nutrients in the water current. And this is one of the coolest video that I have found, is actually some scientists that dive really down there and then to take a look at the deep sea corals. And they do find shrimp as well as a lot of marine animals down there. And it's really cool. Yeah. And it happens to be in the Atlantic Ocean as well. Cool.
Super cool. What a neat video, Nicole. We're getting all sorts of great questions right now. So this is might be a bit of a complicated one, so I'd like you to give a bit of a backstory on it. But Susanna wants to know, are deep water coral reefs protected from coral bleaching because they don't depend on photosynthesis with the algae living within them?
Oh, that's a really good question. So for corals, they do experience a lot of different kind of threats. One of them is called coral bleaching, where those algae on the coral skeletons left and provide no color for the corals, and that's why they do not have extra energy or extra oxygen to live on. And for deep sea corals, even though they do not need corals or photosynthesis in order to get their nutrients, they do experience some degree of climate change effects because if we have a lot of carbon dioxide in the air, which dissolve into the water, and it makes the water more acidic. And that's why a lot of deep sea corals are experiencing a change in water composition, and where the growth of those deep sea coral will become slower and slower. Even though they're really slow already, the data that I have for the deep sea corals growth is like 1 centimeter, less than 1 centimeters per year. So the change in pH would really make that process even slower and slower. So that I'm not sure about if coral bleaching is happening near the deep sea coral area, but I do know that actually there's some effects because of the water, the change in water composition.
Yeah, it's a complicated topic, and one where, for people viewing it at home, deep sea corals is something that was pretty much a shock to scientists. And in the last several decades, like, we had no idea that these really existed, and certainly not in the numbers that they do now. So a lot of research still being undertaken, and check those out. I've passed along a few resources in the YouTube chat bar. Check those out for the latest updates on research on things like that. All right, Jack and Marilyn wants to know, how do all these coral reefs connect to one another to form a big reef? Because they're different. So we have different species. How are they connecting together to make a barrier reef, or one of the things you mentioned? Yeah.
That is a question that I have on my mind all the time as well, because they are very tiny, but they actually end up having a very large community as well as a reef nearby. So for corals, they usually have reproduction on site. So what they do is that they have fragmentation. So for polyps, they try to remove part of their body and left the body behind on some of the coral skeleton, and that part of the body actually grows into another polyps. We call it an asexual reproduction, and that's why we have more and more polyps growing along this coral skeleton. And what they do is actually they just look like a factory. They try to get more calcium and then try to build a much more extensive network around them. So from time to time, as time goes by, they try to reproduce, and the population become higher and higher, and which in turn they can build much more bigger houses around them, much more bigger skeleton around them, so that they can actually protect and connect with other colonies together.
Yeah. One thing that you didn't get a chance to mention, because it's a short presentation, of course, that I love to highlight to people, is if you look at things, geographical features like the cliffs of Dover, you've got these several 100-foot high limestone cliffs. Those were at one time coral reef skeletons built up over thousands, millions of years that got uplifted and are now on the land. So if you see giant limestone cliffs, those are coral reef skeletons. And that's an amazing fact that I just love to pass along. All right, again, great questions coming in. So Calla wants to know how big a coral can get. So like one individual coral, do we have an idea of how big they can get, Nicole?
Oh, for the reef, they can grow up to kilometers long as well. So for Great Barrier Reef, as I know, the length of it or the area can be up to 2,600 kilometers long. And within that, you will see connection between different corals communities. So I would say instead of knowing how big one coral can grow, I would say they just work together and build a very, very large network. But for that that is a very important habitat because a lot of fish like parrotfish, they actually feed on those corals as their food as well. So I encourage you to really look into more and then try to see how big will it be. But from my experience, I can see a coral that is that big in the Maldives. So
Just
it's
keep backing up. Keep backing up.
yeah, keep backing up like this, like even bigger and bigger. But for my experience, the largest one that I saw is this big, I guess.
Yeah, fantastic. That's funny. All right. Ewan and Callum want to know, are there freshwater corals, Nicole?
Whoa. So for corals, they usually live near the seawater. So to my knowledge, there's not no corals that is living near the freshwater. But I'm sure if scientists have advanced knowledge, they might found something really special and unique. And I'm looking forward to see if any scientists can come up with some new species. Yeah, finger crossed for the new species, or they might be found near the fresh water. So we have to wait for scientists to really investigate through that.
Very cool. All right. Robert in Toronto wants to know, how long can corals live? Do we know?
Cool. So for corals, they can live for a long time, just because they are actually help themselves to build very large colonies and also their skeleton. And some of the people actually say that corals will not die because they have fragmentation, because they try to leave part of their body behind, and then that little bit of the polypod can actually grow into something really new and as another individual. So for the corals, they live actually way before human is being discovered in the earth, and their growing rate is really slow. It's like less than 1 centimeters per year, and some of the corals, they actually live here for over 1,000 years slowly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard to, there's a sort of animal that is so different from our understanding as humans and the other things that we run into in our day-by-day lives, that to think of them as having a life expectancy is kind of weird because of how they branch off. They're sort of like trees and other weird things. I'm going to pass along a link to, and this is something we also didn't get a chance to cover today, on coral breeding. So when they all lay their eggs together. So I'm going to pass a video in the chat bar. It's one of my favorite things in all of nature. So I really encourage you to check it out. It's like 2.5 minutes long. It's like fireworks underwater. It's amazing. So Nicole, you sort of answered this already, but about how fast corals can grow. So Jack wants to know about this. So if you have a coral that's like, I don't know, a few inches high, is that something that happens in a year? Is that something that happens in 100 years? Can you give us a sense of how fast they grow?
Yeah, so for some of the coral species, it starts off like a very tiny one that you may not see them with your naked eyes, and they grow every year. For every year, they grow only 1 centimeter long. So if you try to imagine a coral with 100 centimeters long, that is 1 meter long length, it would take like 100 years for them to grow. Yeah. So less than 1 centimeters means that if they really grow into something that we saw from the picture, it took like hundreds or even thousands of years.
Fantastic. And then Ethan wanted to know, do all oceans have coral reefs in them?
Ooh, that's a very cool question. So for most of the corals, they actually live near the shallow water of tropical and subtropical area. Some of the deep sea coral actually be found in Atlantic Ocean and also some deep sea region as well. So, but for a lot of corals, they cannot survive in cold temperature. So I would say for different ocean, for Pacific Ocean or even Atlantic Ocean or Indian Ocean, you may see a lot of corals living around. But the water is like near North Pole or even South Pole, there might be a less chance for you to see corals there.
Yeah, less chance. I did just look this up, as this is something that I didn't know until a couple of years ago. There are cold water corals. There are nowhere near as many of them, and they don't get near as big as the ones in tropical seas, but they do exist in cold water oceans around the world. So they're really cool too. Reefs are awesome. Like, they're just the coolest places. Nicole, you had said at the beginning that when we wrapped up with Q&A, you wanted to get in a conservation message. And so we've been getting this question from a few people anyway. How can people protect corals? What are some of the threats that our corals are facing, and what can we do about it here at home?
Good question. So for corals, they have different threats. So just now we have talked about coral bleaching, where we have too many carbon dioxide due to burning fossil fuel, and then so as a result we have a lot of carbon dioxide in the ocean, which try to modify the pH value to make the ocean more acidic. And a lot of animals cannot adapt rapidly to the change of environment, so they die immediately. And for another cause that is threatening the corals is that we have overfishing, and we have because of the technology that we have, we tend to put a very heavy fishing nets to the ground, to the seafloor. And what the fishermen do is they try to drag all the things along in the seafloor, and they grab everything, including corals, the fish, even the seas, cucumber, the sharks, the sea turtles in one go. And that's why there's not much thing left after the dragging, or after they pull the fishing nets around. And so that's why there is habitat destruction just because of that. And this is something that we need to focus on as well. So for coral bleaching, because of the burning of fossil fuel, we can do a lot of things about that by turning off the light when it is not in use, and try to do more sustainable actions. Like recently I tried to do biking much more than driving, so that I can save more energy and save more electricity. And I try to read more books while I'm staying at home, instead of watching videos or trying to watch TV. That's something that we can do in your daily life as well. And for habitat destruction, we can also do something. So if you try to fish, try to fish near a lake or even near the coastal area, try to be aware of what fishing gear you are using, and try to pack everything, and try not to leave any trash or even fishing gear after you have done fishing, or try to after playing in such a nice environment, because those trash will become marine litter and try to harm those ocean and the animals inside. So try to be aware of what you're doing in your daily life. And of course, you can also explore more about the ocean. The more we know, actually we can brainstorm more information, or try to know more ideas on how to protect or try to save the ocean together. So for myself, I have my major in Hong Kong as applied biology and also environmental science. The more that I know about the ocean, the more that I determine to really help the ocean by having my job as an educator, and try to spread the message and try to tell people how to be more sustainable, try to be more eco-friendly in order to help with the ocean a little bit. So all our actions matters a lot. So our small sustainable action, our eco-friendly action can actually lead to a great impact too. So it's not just our job for educators to spread the news, but you can do it together as well. Try to learn more and try to really tell people about what's going on for the ocean.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's such a nice thing with coral reefs that basically the things that people can do at home really, really easily can have a huge impact. It's not something rare or weird. You know, stop wasting, do better. Try and not use energy when you can, and choose sustainable seafood. And this is something that you guys do really well. You guys have Ocean Wise, which is a little symbol you'll see beside fish products at restaurants and grocery stores. And if you pick those products, those are fish that are caught in a sustainable way. And so they aren't breaking up coral reefs to get those fish. That's something you can do at home that makes a huge difference. Nicole, this was so great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. For more information, you can actually go to our website. It's education.ocean.org. And also I will have YouTube channel, and then you can just check out more videos if you like.
Fantastic. I put the education site in the YouTube chat bar, so do check that out. And then check us out at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. We're going to be doing more sessions with Nicole over the coming weeks, featuring all sorts of amazing topics. We've already done 2 in the last week, so if you want to check back our archive on YouTube and check those out, I encourage you to do so. They're all free, no registration required. We look so very forward to having you. And for now, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now, Nicole.
Bye.